Welcome back to the Fit Dad Club podcast. You're here with Travis Jones and Jason Barrett. Jace, how are you doing today, mate?
Feeling fresh, doing good. I came off the back of my first run in my series of learning how to run and just kind of jogging better, right? As much as I've talked shit about, oh, running's, not great for your knees and your hips and it's not like the best form of cardio. It's also like, kids run around and they want to run around and they want dads who can run around with them and chase after them and be faster than them and shit. So I'm like, I've bit the bullet and I've put it out publicly that I am learning how to run better and faster and all the above. So feeling good. No injuries yet. Day one.
Mate, 100%. As you know, we've talked about, like, I run not for the sake of running. I run so I can dominate my children as long as I possibly can. We talked about that Instagram thing we
Yeah.
saw the other day. It's like,
Yeah.
I want my son to be like 28 and be still dominating him. Like,
In a foot race.
exactly.
Yeah.
My goal in life is to dominate my children as long as possible. And they're like, oh, but what? You should let your kids win. It's like, no, they need to learn the
No,
real
no.
world. Their dad
Yeah.
is going to try and out-train them until I break down and they can beat me. I was like, now
Yeah.
I'll pass the torch on to you.
Yeah, exactly,
can,
exactly. I'm kind of the same way with video games personally. I'm like, look, I'll give them all the tools available, but I want to be able to beat them at Tekken, Mario Kart, any like Mortal Kombat, whatever. I'll fucking annihilate them until they're ready. I'm going to teach them the hand-eye coordination, the fine motor skills.
Exactly. So, guys, today we're talking about something we get asked all the time. And also some people are confused about when to do each of these things. And that's where it's talking about what is a cut and when should you cut as far as go into a fat loss phase. When should you bulk or when should you go into a muscle gaining phase or a maintenance phase or when we can just maintain our results if that's a focus. Or there is also the fourth one, which is like a slower body recomposition phase, which is somewhat losing fat and gaining lean muscle at the same time. Now, that probably sounds the sexiest for most people, but is probably the most demotivating out of all of them because there is the slowest way to get something. So, it might sound sexy, but it's not that sexy. So the first thing, Jace, is I want to talk about cut, like when to cut. Which is, essentially referring to a fat loss phase, which I would say 95% of people listening to this podcast need to be in. Okay. So the goal is inside a cut or inside a fat loss phase is to lean out, okay, to decrease body fat as much as you possibly can, whilst maintaining lean muscle mass. So this requires a calorie deficit. So you're losing weight, but requires us to make sure we're doing a couple of little nuances to retain, if not gain, some lean muscle mass for beginners and novices, whilst just dropping serious amounts of fat. So I think that's essentially what we look at with a fat loss phase or a cut phase. Now, for advanced people, you're probably not going to gain lean muscle mass in the cut. You probably even lose a little bit of lean muscle mass in the cut. That's why, all the novices and the beginners out there listening to this or people who have had a bit of a time off the gym, it's why you should nail your training and nail your nutrition when you first get back into it, because that's when you're primed to gain some lean muscle mass and lose body fat at the same time.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to a number of guys about this that are just getting started or getting back into it after a while. Like, I wish I had me as a coach when I was 16, 17, 18, just getting into this, because I did all sorts of stupid shit with my training. But if I had, made the most of it and had a coach who was going to, teach me, all right, let's do the big compound lifts and we'll make sure we got progressive overload and we'll get in week and get enough volume in there to get the growth going, I would have gotten far better results in that initial phase. But as Trav said, cut, a deficit, fat loss phase, all kind of means the same thing, which means you're eating in a calorie deficit. Your goal is more so skewed towards losing body fat to reveal the muscle that's underneath. So that is, as Trev said, it's relevant for pretty much like 95% of guys that are going to be listening to this, dropping a little bit of extra body fat, unless you can see like, almost clearly like the top 4 abs. Like I checked in the mirror today, I've been on 4 weeks of a mini cut. I can now see sort of my top 4 abs, and if I flex, it kind of all comes together. So I'm like, cool. I know now that from my bulk phase, I've maintained being about 4 weeks away from visible abs, which I'm pretty happy with. So when it comes to your own goals, if your goals are at all health related, physique related, then a cut is going to be the best thing, because losing excess body fat is one of the biggest improvers in all your health markers that you can do. Excess, the key being excess, right? We're not getting down to 5%, 3% as like a bodybuilder, right? But that excess body fat, dropping that is going to be the biggest improver in your health. It's going to be the biggest improver in your energy and all of the other things, because you're not carrying around that excess stuff. So for most people, cut is going to be your go-to, right? Now, in terms of, I guess, a longer vision of a cut, that's when you might start to think about introducing periodic maintenance phases, right? Periodic phases of eating at maintenance calories, which is what the name suggests, so eating a little bit more, because if you go on a cut for a very, very, very long time, that can be, number one, psychologically pretty demotivating. Number two, your hunger hormones can start to kind of get a little bit out of whack, start to get sort of a little bit too much too much hunger hormones, too many hunger signals going on, and becomes a little bit hard. So psychologically coming back up to maintenance, physically, physiologically going back up to maintenance, getting some more glycogen in, getting some more fuel in for your muscles, for your training sessions, so you can get some energy back, right? Refueling yourself, getting some sleep, and then going back into a deficit. So it's, in terms of the bigger picture version of a cut, is where you might introduce a couple of maintenance phases for a couple of weeks, just to kind of reset yourself a little bit and to give yourself a bit of a reprieve.
Completely agree, mate. And I think, people think about this, if you haven't tracked calories before, when we're going into a track, going into a cutting phase, what we measure, we manage in life. And we're going into a cut, we want to actually measure our calories so we can manage them, so we understand what we're eating, so we can know, are we eating a calorie maintenance or are we eating a calorie deficit? Your body burns a certain amount of calories on a daily basis, which is total daily energy expenditure. If we eat below that, so say 500 calories a day below that, you're going to lose about half a kilo a week. And that's just is what it is. It takes 7,700 calories to burn a kilo of body fat or a kilo of weight. So we have to understand how many calories you're going to be eating, and then we need to subtract a certain amount of calories off that to start losing weight. Now, the optimal amount of weight you should be losing on a weekly basis, so to preserve lean muscle mass, is about 1% total body weight per week. When you're a little bit more overweight, I go the more the aggressive side to 1.5%. So if you're like 120 kilos and carrying a bit more blubber, then we want to be losing somewhere about 1.7 kilos per week. If maybe you're a little bit leaner, you got like 10 kilos to lose, you're 90 kilos, then we want to go around that 900 grams per week, and I'd be happy with that, knowing that you get to your goal within about 10 weeks. So, and then if we're getting on the leaner side of things, and this is when we're coaching people, towards getting abs or towards getting the most athletic and healthiest version of them, when they start getting like, 11, 12, 13% body fat, maybe top couple of abs are starting, or top like visible abs are starting to come through. We look about 0.5% per week of body weight, because we want to essentially make sure that we're preserving lean muscle mass, because as we get leaner, the ability to lose lean muscle mass is higher because there's less fat mass to essentially burn off. At the end of the day, your body is literally cannibalizing itself on a daily and weekly basis, and that's what a cut is. It's breaking down your tissue, and that's why we want fat tissue to be broken down, not muscle tissue. And that's why this is science, not hocus pocus bullshit. So we're not manifesting fucking bullshit here. We're actually focusing with protein, making sure we're focusing with specific training regimes, and also not like, guessing how many calories we're eating, because we can go, well, we've hit a plateau. We want to be at 1% total body weight per week. We need to make a change in our calories. I think that's why we track at the end of the day, so we can make specific data-driven decisions, not hypothetical wind change, let's lose more calories sort of decisions. So we have to have data-driven decisions, and that means it's specific. It means we go, okay, I know you're eating 1,800 calories a day. I know you're eating 2,000 calories a day, 14,000 calories a week. We know that we can go down by another 10% off that. We can drop down to 1,800 calories. We're going to drive you straight into a calorie deficit, and you're going to keep losing that weight at a great rate inside this cut. So data is the most driven thing. If you're eating a certain amount of calories at the moment and you're not losing, say, 1% total body weight per week, then we want to make sure that you're going to go into a slightly more aggressive calories, like drop 100 calories off the board each day, and you're going to start to drop that little bit more weight each week. And I think that is a big thing. Now, the last thing I'm going to say when I pass off over to you, Jace, is guys, on the lower end of things, when you're in a cut, make sure you're eating 1.5 grams of protein per kilo. Like a lot of my guys coming on to start with, they're eating like, 0.6 grams per kilo or 0.8 grams of protein per kilo. Now they're going to lose higher amounts of lean muscle mass with that, or they're doing a lot of running or just doing some body weight training. Now, body weight training is fine for the first 4 to 6 weeks if you can't get access to a gym or you don't have dumbbells or anything like that. But after that, push them towards making sure they get dumbbells so we can actually put more resistance, because we need to put resistance against the muscle. We need to make sure that we're actually having enough protein, so we're giving the amino acids to the muscle, so we're not losing muscle mass. So 1.5 grams of protein per 1.5 grams of protein per kilo body weight. So if you're 100 kilos, you want to be eating about 150 grams of protein, all the way up to about 2.2. Don't mind people going up to, say, again, 220 grams of protein as well. Protein has a higher thermic effect of food. It's burnt off more by digestion, which helps fat loss as well. So it's a caveat. We must be eating enough protein and doing some form of resistance training. If we're just going for runs, we're not going to hold lean muscle mass, and you're just going to lose total weight, which means you're fat right now and you're just going to end up being skinny fat.
Yeah, no one wants to be skinny fat. You have tiny, these stick thin arms and a little bit of a pot belly. It's not a good look on anyone. Or you go hardcore and then you end up looking like a marathon runner, which again, some people want that physique, some people don't. Trav's a marathon runner. Look at him. Right? He's a unit. So you want to be eating in a deficit. You want to have to maximize your protein. If you've ever wondered why the fitness industry and TikTok and Facebook and all these things, they have such a focus on protein intake, this is why, right? You've got such a disproportionate positive effect from increasing your protein intake, not only from fullness but from preserving your muscle mass. There's essential amino acids, obviously, which help promote muscle growth and muscle retention, which is very important, because if you don't do that, then a lot of guys are like, I don't really want to be like Arnold. I just want to tone, right? This is something that we get from a lot of guys. I just want to be toned. How do you create tone? You need to, first of all, have enough muscle mass there to, for something to be toned around, right? Like if you wrap a Glad wrap around a pumpkin, it's not going to look very toned, right? You need to have, well, maybe it will, I don't know. Terrible example. But you need to have something that is hard enough and solid enough and has enough to be defined in terms of your muscle mass. And also you need to remove the body fat that is hiding it, in essence. So those are the two things that go hand in hand. For most people, they just need to lose a bit more body fat first, and then we can look at gaining muscle mass. But that means that we need to preserve as much muscle as we can and potentially gain some, which we'll talk about later. That means weight training at least 3 to 4 times a week, right? As like a minimum. If you're just getting started, I think we've talked about beginner training programs in like some of the first episodes of the podcast, where you can get away with doing some full body sessions or some real, a couple of splits where I focus on upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body. You just kind of get everything working a couple of times a week. That's going to retain as much muscle as possible. The deficit is going to take care of the body fat, right? We train in order to preserve and gain muscle. We diet in order to lose fat. If you combine those two things, you're going to get shredded. You're going to maintain as much muscle as you've got. And if you don't have that much muscle, well, guess what? That's what the bulking plan is for. But that's the focus for the deficit. And most people, once you do that, in my perspective, it's worth, even if your goal is not to then gain a bunch of muscle mass, you're happy with just getting to that point, it's worth having a coach, and it's worth having someone to then, because most people will lose the body fat and they'll just fucking, they'll do the runs and the salads and they'll wonder why they're skinny fat. And then they'll go, well, now what? Right? I've lost all this weight. I've done all this stuff. I've gotten the result. I've gotten down to the abs, and now what? And then they don't have a plan. And this is the biggest thing that lets guys down. This is the biggest thing that lets everyone down, but specifically guys, when you get to that point where you've got the result and you ask yourself, now what? What do I do now? I either eat like I'm on a deficit, which, towards the tail end of a deficit can be pretty hardcore and can be pretty, it's a finite thing. You're not trying to do this forever. A lot of people jump onto a program like, oh, do I have to eat fucking chicken breast and rice and broccoli forever? Well, it's like, well, first of all, you don't have to eat it in the first place. But second of all, no, not forever. Those more protein focused, more lean meals do have to be incorporated for quite a period of time. Once you've got the result, then I would say look at doing a maintenance phase. so you don't rebound, so you don't go crazy and go, oh, I've heard about this thing called fucking turbo bulking. I'm going to get 3 pizzas and order KFC and have, the Rock's cheat meal for breakfast with pancakes and French toast and shit. It's like, you're not the Rock. You're not blasting as much gear as the Rock. You're not training as hard as the Rock. Don't fucking emulate that shit. But that's where I feel like for most people, a maintenance phase, that's like what should be their first visit at a maintenance phase is post cut. And to find a maintenance phase, very, very simple, right? The simplest way to find your maintenance calories, right? Again, because we're continuing to track during this period, we don't just go to intuitive eating from a cut. The reason why is because your hunger hormones are out of whack. You're feeling restricted. You haven't had psychologically, you haven't had the freedom to kind of pick what you want. So if you give yourself that intuitive eating, your body's going to be like, I want fucking cookies because I haven't had them for 12, 16 weeks. So find whatever the amount of weight you've been losing on average, if it's been about 500 grams, if it's been about a kilo up until that point, then you can realistically look and say, well, if I've been losing on average 500 grams a week, then as Trav said, I must be in about a 3,500 calorie deficit a week. So if you increase your weekly calories by about 3,500 calories, so what's that, like about 70, 70 is like 60 calories or so a week, 50, 60 calories, I think, no, not a week, sorry. What I'm trying to, no,
where's your math going, mate?
My maths is honestly, I used to be really good at mental maths. You wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it by looking at me.
If you're eating about 1,600 calories a day, then you'd go up to about 2,000, 2,100 a day.
Yeah, 400, 4 times 7. Yeah. 5 times 7, 500 calories. 500. Actually, I had the maths in my head. It is actually 500 calories a day. It's a very simple equation. Guys, trust me. Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. So if you're essentially, look, if you're in a 3,500 calorie a week deficit, I think I said 50 initially, 500 calories a day, you can realistically add on. And then again, continue to track your weight, continue to track your progress. That should put you, somewhere in the vicinity of maintenance. And after about 2 weeks, you've still maintained your weight, cool, you're in the maintenance period. I would hold that for at least a good sort of 3 weeks, purely from the fact of getting used to what does this look like for me, right? What does this lifestyle look like in terms of maintaining these results? Because if you don't, your body will naturally want to rebound and regain some of the weight that it's lost because it's gotten so comfortable at that point. It's what a lot of people call the body fat set point, which is your hunger will want to, you've been essentially quote unquote starving yourself for 12 to 16 weeks. Your body wants to get back up there. So you need to have control and you need to have a plan for when you finish your cut.
I think that's the biggest thing. It's like you need to have a plan. There's 2 different ways of doing it. Just like Jay said, then you can go, okay, well, if I've lost half a kilo a week over the last couple of weeks, and that means I'm in a 3,500 calorie deficit, so I increase by 500 calories a day. Or you can go into more of a reverse dieting period, which I typically like a lot of the time with newer people into like beginners and novices and intermediates, because what we're doing then is we're still focusing on a circumference measurement around the abdomen. And this is what I really look at with this. So we'll increase. So say you're eating 1,500 calories a day, we'll increase next week by like 5% to 10%, like somewhere in that ballpark. So, we'll go up to 1,600 calories a day for the next week. And then is our midsection measurement still holding? Yes. Okay. Next week we'll go 1,700. Next week we'll go 1,800. And if a midsection blows out by a centimeter, and then I'll hold that for 2 weeks instead of 1 week until we sort of find that kind of maintenance area where it's like, hey, I'm starting to actually gain, my midsection starting to blow out. It's like, okay, well now you're in a small surplus. We can come back down into our maintenance, because what a lot of people do incorrectly is like, oh, I'll just go back to my previous maintenance like I was at the start. I was like, no, you're 15 kilos lighter. What was your maintenance at 100 kilos is not your maintenance at 85 kilos. There's 2 completely different maintenance. A smaller person burns less calories on a daily basis. So you can either do the first option, go straight to maintenance. Know that your weight will spike straight away because you're going to have more food in your body. Okay. You're going to be glycogen full rather than glycogen depleted, which is like your body's full of carbohydrates. So don't be scared about that. I think that's a big thing. Or you can go into a small reverse diet. Don't really stress too much about your weight in the first like 3 to 4 weeks. If you're doing a reverse diet, you just it will slowly creep up a little bit. But I generally look at that belly button midsection measurement with guys and making sure we're somewhat maintaining within 1 centimeter on that sort of first 4 weeks of a reverse diet. And then we can go, okay, now we're moving and we're at maintenance. We can hold, reset my body fat set point if we're tracking for the next sort of 4 to 6 months. And remember, guys, after that, if you don't want to gain, you don't want to cut, keep tracking your body weight. Oh, that's obsessive. It's like, no, the studies show the people that keep a monitor of their weight are less likely to put their weight back on, because it's just a data point. You're like, oh, I've put on 2 kilos. I can just eat a little bit less for the next 2 days and I'm just going to be back in line. And it's like, you'll get to that period. And I think that's a really, like, people, when they've been tracking for a longer period of time, they go, oh no, I don't want to do my weight anymore. It's like, no, keep doing your weight. It's important. Just like it's still important to look at your bank account after you've bought your house. Like, it's important. If not,
But I've already made my money, Trav. Why do I have to look at my account again?
Yeah, it's like, no, you save for a deposit for your house. You still got to pay your mortgage. If not, you lose your house. It's like, you've lost your weight. You still got to look at your calories and your weight, because if not, you're going to lose your body and you're going to be fat again. Like, we don't want that to happen.
This is how a lot of guys got fat enough. This is the theme I've seen time and time again. This is how a lot of guys got fat in the first place. It's not 3 weeks of fucking partying and drinking and eating that gets you there. No, it's over the course of a year. You eat at maintenance, but then there's those, every week, maybe there's a barbecue, maybe there's, the Christmas period comes up and you have a couple of extra drinks and you start to get a little bit loosey-goosey with it. And if you don't, and we've talked about this before, if you don't have a handle on it, and if you don't have a rein on it, then it takes time. It's a slow burn. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, but you get 2 kilos a year. Next year, 2 kilos a year. Guess what? 5 years passes. Those of you kids as well, which should be most of you, the Fit Dad Club podcast. It's not the Fit Bachelors Club podcast. That's every other one. That's 10 kilos in 5 years. And guess what? 5 years passes quickly. You're back where you fucking started, because you just let it get out of control. So if you weigh in, doesn't have to be daily, but every other day, you don't even have to fucking like log it necessarily. But if you know, hey, my happy point is like 85 kilos, 86 kilos, then if you start creeping up towards sort of 88 consistently, not just after a big night, then you're like, all right, I've been a little bit loosey goosey with it, I can bring it back down a bit. And then you don't have to go on the long extended cut. Like you circumvent the need to do a big deficit by just being aware of your weight. And there are going to be people who like weighing themselves is going to be triggering. It's going to be an issue because there's some emotional issues attached to it. Those often aren't going to be the people that have been naturally blowing out to 140 kilos, to 130 kilos. So now there's a guy I watch on YouTube. He does like financial, like basically for millennials, people who have fucking no idea about money. And they're just like, oh, he's like, why are you going to Taco Bell 3 times a day? That sort of shit, right? He has a saying. He's like, you are not a credit card person. Right. And for the people who have credit cards and just spend shit on it and don't ever pay it off. It's like, that's not you. You're not a credit card person. Just accept that. And there are going to be some dads out there. It's like, you are not a intuitive eating person, right? You are not a person who can take their finger off the pulse of you tracking your weight, of you having an awareness of what you're eating. Obviously, increasing your nutrition IQ will come with that, but you might not be the person who can go without at least maybe once a week checking in on the scale to be like, oh shit, I didn't realize that my intuitive eating was actually a slow bulk, right? And if you're not training hard enough during that period, then you're not going to be putting any of that extra energy to use, which is like, that's the other point with the reverse diet, is making sure that you are still hitting the gym. You're using the extra fuel you're putting in for a purpose. You're not just using it to take some time off. You're still increasing and keeping your expenditure high. Like a lot of people kind of want to be like, oh, I can stop going for walks and all that sort of stuff now. It's like, well, that's the problem. You stop going for walks, you stop training as hard because you're off the cut, and then you start eating more. It's like, well, you've artificially put yourself above maintenance. Now you're into a surplus. And then you're like, oh, Trav said I'd gain a bit of weight in the first couple of weeks. That's fine. Then that first couple of weeks keeps going and keeps going and keeps going.
100%, mate. And remember, this is the Fit Dad podcast, not the Fit Dad Die of Heart Disease Not Fit podcast. So we still want to be doing some cardio and getting our walks in.
Do some runs like me.
Exactly. But I think when we don't look at our weight because we've had a couple of big weekends, the only reason why we don't want to look at our weight, because we don't want to know what it says at the end of the day. We don't want to know the damage. And you may as well then go live in Egypt and hang out on the River Denial. So, like, I
was wondering, I thought you were going to say something about burying your head in the sand. I didn't know where you're going, but I like it.
Yeah. So
Denial's not just a river in Egypt.
No, exactly. It's when you don't look at the weight. So it's like, it's my dad joke for the day. So with this, guys, we don't want to be in denial. We want to like own it and go, okay, well, I put on 2 kilos. Like, I just need to hone my nutrition over the next couple of days or the next 7 days and I'm good. So when we look at this, we've got to be tracking it. We're going into a reverse diet, or we're going to a maintenance. Like, we can go into a bulking phase. I just want to, because a lot of people do this so wrong. We need to track in a bulking phase. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Jace has talked about in the past. Like, I think, but I don't like the word bulk. I hate it, right? Because like, I don't like the visual representation of it. I like to call it a lean mass gain or a lean muscle gain phase, because that's what we're trying
surplus.
to do. Yeah, it's like, or we're going into a minor calorie surplus. So with this, because we're trying to minimize fat gain. This isn't like, hey, let's eat all the food we can, and like that's what's going to just fuel my muscles to grow. It's like, no, we want to eat as little as possible above maintenance to maximize muscle gain and minimize fat gain. Like, that's literally the focus of a lean mass gain, or a small calorie surplus, which really is about 5% above maintenance calories. And that's what you're looking at. So again, we're tracking our calories. We want to start gaining lean mass. We increase calories by about 5% per day. And then, we start to put on weight. Now, as you gain weight, also your metabolism will increase. So then you keep tracking, am I increasing my weight? Now, to know if your calories are on point, when we're looking at a lean mass gaining phase, if you're a beginner, we want to increase our total body weight by about 2% per month. So now we're talking months, not weeks. Okay, by about 2% per month. If you're like a novice and you've been training for a while, about 1.5% per month. And if you're like an intermediate trainer, then about 1% per month. I don't think there's going to be too many advanced guys listening to this podcast, because they're probably, think they're jacked as hell. So, they can listen to the Jacked as Hell podcast. It's a Fit Dad podcast. So with this, guys, so if we're somewhere in between there, and if you think you're an advanced, trust me, you're not, you're an intermediate. So with this,
I'm an intermediate. I've been training for like 10 years. I'm barely intermediate.
Exactly. I'm an intermediate, right? So it's like, so that means, guys, just to put it this, because you're like, oh, you're saying all these numbers, I don't understand. It's like, I wouldn't understand either. 90 kilo, you just finished your cut, you weigh 90 kilos, you're going into a lean mass gain phase. If you're a beginner, that means you're only gaining 1.8 kilos per month. Okay. So it's like 450 grams a week. Novice, you're going to be gaining 1.35 kilos per month. If you're an intermediate, gaining 900 grams per month. So it's not much. And you'll get about 60%, 50 to 60% of that is lean muscle gain. 40 to 50% is going to be fat gain. So you are going to gain fat in a bulk, okay, or in a lean mass gain, but we minimize it by putting our focus on just a small calorie surplus. And if we're not gaining at that rate, we can increase the calories another 5%. If we're gaining too fast, we can decrease calories slightly. So then if we're going into a calorie surplus and lean mass gain phase, we don't want to do it too early, okay, because we want to be going into a gaining phase for about 4 months at a time, right? Because it's 16 weeks. Now, if we're putting on about, again, say 600 grams of fat per month, that means over that 4 months, you're putting on about 2.5 kilos of fat mass, and you're putting on about 2.5 kilos of lean muscle mass. Okay, so you're like, only 2.5 kilos lean muscle mass? Well, it is still a fair amount. If you're lean, it looks like a lot. If you're fat, you chose to bulk too early, right? Like, it's just like, and this is the problem. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm getting too skinny. It's like, no, dude, you're not lean enough to go on a bulk yet. I don't care if your wife says you're skinny, your mate says you're skinny. They're just taking the piss out of you. Like, that's what we do as humans, as Australians. So you just need to ignore them. If I can't see your abs, we're not ready for a bulk, right? We're just not ready to gain mass, because when we look at it, your fat mass will keep going up. And if you start to go into a lean mass gain too early, you're not going to be able to go into a gaining phase for a 4 month period of time. You probably go 2 months and you'll start to feel uncomfortable because you're starting to put too much fat on again. And you start to get, I'm not happy with myself as far as the amount of fat I'm carrying. So then we go into another cut, and we're not actually maximizing our gaining phases. So if you do it too early, you're not going to maximize it. You're constantly chopping and churning. But like me and Jace have talked in the past, like with him, it's like, dude, go for 4 months, cut for 1 month. Go for 4 months, cut for 1 month. Because it's quite easily, Jace, you've lost in the last 4 weeks about 3 kilos, right?
Yeah, about 3.5 kilos I've lost so far.
About 3.5 kilos. So, when we're looking at this, you can gain for 4 months. You do a diet. to, drop that excess fat you put on over the 4 months for 1 month. Then you go again for another 4 months. And then every 4 months, you're going to put on 2.5 kilos. You drop the excess 2.5 kilos of the month of cutting. And then you go again and you're slowly kind of wave loading your lean mass gain. And over the course of a year, we've put on 5 kilos of lean mass. We've maintained a good level of body fat. And if you think about it, like a kilo of eye fillet steak, it ends up being quite good. And if you're training properly, you're putting a kilo of eye fillet on your shoulder, putting a kilo of eye fillet on your pec, you're putting a kilo of eye fillet on your ass. Like, you start to actually pad out. And if you're lean, you look bigger anyway. That's why I always say it's like cut down to you see at least the top 4 abs, because we know that we're going to maximize the next 4 months in a mass gaining phase, and you're not going to feel too uncomfortable with an extra 2.5 kilos of fat on you.
Yeah, it is the reason why this, and look, there's science that says sort of different directions when it comes to, how much fat should you gain and can you gain and still maximize muscle mass, but there's a big psychological element to this. And for a lot of guys, the reason why they spin their wheels is because cut, feel too skinny, feel too small, so I go back to bulking. Bulk, feel too pudgy, feel too unfit, go back to cut, right? Like they'll just constantly fucking flitter between those two. To put on muscle mass, it takes a lot of focus and a lot of effort and a lot of intensity, especially in the gym, right? In order for you to, because you need to progress pretty much week in, week out in order for you to grow. You need to, and with the exception of deload weeks, you need to push it, right? And you also need to just, you can't be fucking YOLO mode on it, right? Like a lot of people are like, oh, fuck it, I thought bulking was when you could kind of let go and whatever. It's like a lot of people associate tracking calories and tracking macros with, oh, it's painful and it's annoying and it's this and that. It's only painful and annoying when you're fucking restricted, right? Yeah. And when you're eating 1,600 calories or 1,800 calories or whatever, right? When you're in that mode, yes, it's annoying because it's like, oh, I can't fit in the cheesecake. I can't fit in the beers or whatever. And it's like, no, well, when you're in a surplus, guess what? It becomes annoying because you're fuck, I've got to eat all this food. And then your perspective shifts. You're like, oh shit, I haven't eaten much by midday. I fucking got to get a big meal in. So the muscle gain phase that you're going on needs to be, if you do start from a leaner point, then psychologically you feel a lot better because your body fat percentage your body fat, like the weight goes up, but your body fat percentage doesn't go up quite as high because you started from a leaner place, and then you feel better in that journey. But if you are serious about gaining lean muscle mass, you have to accept that fat mass is going to come with it. And you have to accept that if you want to maximize it, you do need to spend a good chunk of your year. This is like, 80% of your year in a surplus, in a focused and purposeful, because it takes time for your body to get into, especially from a long cut, get into muscle building mode and really sort of, maximize the pathways of muscle protein synthesis, of hypertrophy, because it's been depleted for so long. It does take time to get into that mode. So maybe even for your first muscle gain phase, as you're reverse dieting up, I'd give yourself, you're getting to that point of maintenance and you find that small surplus and you give yourself maybe a bit more than 4 months potentially, just to kind of, if you're still making gains in the gym and you're happy with the way you're looking, then keep going, right? You're still making gains, meaningful progress. If you start to plateau, right, or you start to lose motivation in the gym, or you start like your strength gains have kind of, petered out, or go for a deload, maybe take a shortcut, drop some of that body fat. You can go a bit more hardcore like Trav does from time to time and do, 1,200 calories and, 200 grams of protein. Yeah, you can do that. A very aggressive cut. Your body doesn't know what hit it. You feel lighter. You feel you stoke your hunger again. You're like, oh, it's like one of the things that I heard shared with me, which was pretty cool, was like the idea of if you stop, if you start like not feeling hungry anymore, as you start to like really like, oh my God, like eating has become a chore, it might be a good psychological time to go for a cut. But I didn't reach that point. I was about 6 months eating in a small surplus. I didn't really reach that point. And that's the problem, because most people go fucking super all out. Oh, I'm going to eat these massive meals before every workout and after every workout. It's like, well, no wonder you hit the point of hunger saturation so early, because you're like, oh, fuck, this is too much, because it is too much. So it's a slight surplus. It is tracked and it's monitored. But the bigger aspect of this, and this is the whole reason why I went on a mini cut, was because I hurt my back. So I couldn't train hard. And if you can't train hard, don't fucking eat hard. That is, there's Jason's words of wisdom. That's why I gained 30 kilos of fat and then had to lose it all for the next 2 years, because I bulked like I was training hard, but I wasn't training at all. And that's just called getting fat. It's not, I use my little words, oh, but I'm massing. No, I'm not. I am massing fat. I'm going for the sumo wrestler championship. But that's the focus. If you are on a mass phase, you've got to be progressive overload with your training, week in, week out. Like there's got to be meaningful progress, whether it's form and like hitting a better depth and better tempo on your reps, whether it's more reps, whether it's more weight, or whether it's more sets. There's got to be an increase of volume in some capacity, because otherwise you're not giving your muscles a new stimulus to actually want to grow. So that's the two kind of things that go hand in hand with bulking. You got to be willing to train hard, and you got to, I would say you've arguably got to dedicate more time and effort to your training on a bulk than you do on a cut. Because on a cut, you can get away with like trying to hit the same reps each week. You can get away with, just getting a stimulus in and being like, fuck, I'm exhausted because I'm not eating much. Cool. Well, guess what? You still stimulated the muscle. You did something that was, it's better than nothing. Whereas in a bulk, like phoning in a third of your sessions is going to result in really subpar results.
100%, man. And I think when we're looking at this, a couple of things I just want to touch on before we talk about the training side just a little bit more. Like, guys, if you can't decide whether you can cut, whether you should cut or bulk, this probably means you should cut, right? Because like you know if you need to bulk. Yeah. Trust me. Because you're like, oh fuck, I'm shredded. Okay, cool. Time to bulk. Time to bulk.
Oh, I can see my dick again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, if you can't decide, then it's like basically, can I see some abs? Yep. Then let's go for a bulk. It's not that I'm feeling skinny. It's like I hate that word with guys. You're not skinny. You're either lean or you're fat. Okay, so we either, if you can't see some of your abs, it's probably the clearest definition. If you've got a six pack, you're going to be sitting around 10% body fat, right? It just is what it is. That's, a just very broad guideline for us to go by. Now, with this, if you're getting there, you can bulk. And then we sort of bulk between 10% up to 16% body fat. If you're not doing your scans, it doesn't matter. I can tell you on a visual representation. If you send me your photos, just make sure you get your pants on when you send them to me.
And no pubes hanging out, please.
Yeah, no. And then, or you can Google it. It's like visual representation of body fats. Google that and you can show some stuff. But it's like if you're at 10 to 12%, you can go into a bulk. If you're above 16%, I always suggest you should cut. If not, you're just going to feel too fat during the process. So that's what we sort of look at with that. If you're also like there's people out there that's just skinny fat. Okay. So it's like they've got like leaner limbs, except they've got a pot belly. And they're like, oh, I don't need to lose weight. I just need to lose your gut. And that's what a lot of people say to us. It's like, dude, no, you have high amounts of body fat. Okay. Now, this is even worse because you're more in line for dyslipidemia, which is like heart disease. Like there's other issues with being skinny fat because we need muscle mass on our body. So, what should you do if you're skinny fat? Also, well, if we go into a bulk, your gut's going to get bigger. So you still need to lose weight. You still need to lose fat. So what happens is you're going to go into a cut. You might feel a little bit, inverted commas, skinny. I'm going to call it lean. You might feel a bit skinny for the time being, but you have to feel that to drop your gut to then go into a progressive lean mass gain phase for the next 8 months. You have to get to the point of, I feel a bit skinny for those types of guys to start with, to then focus on gaining lean mass, to making sure we're not putting more and more fat on our gut. So if you are skinny fat, you got to go on a cut first. Let's get you a bit shredded, and then we can go into a meaningful lean mass gain phase. So you are going to focus on making sure you're getting jacked and lean at the same time inside your constraints, guys, because obviously, yes, we are dads. Now, with this, okay, how should we train if I'm trying to be in a cut, and how should I be training if I'm trying to, get some lean mass? And when I'm looking at it, your training is basically the same. Okay, like Jay said,
I was going to go exactly the fucking same.
It's exactly the same, right? Like, when we're in a calorie deficit, Jay said before, we train to preserve muscle mass. We diet to lose fat. And in a bulk, we train to gain muscle mass. We diet to gain the weight. So it's like all it is calories going up, calories going down. When we're training in a cut or we're training in a mass gain phase, we're always training between 1 to 2 reps for failure because that's where we're getting that sort of stimulus for lean mass gain. We need to focus on making sure we're in it when we're in our bulk. We focus on our recovery. These other factors. Are we sleeping enough? Are we hydrated? Are we getting enough protein? We can look at protein timing and carbohydrate timing. That's okay. But when we're looking at this, our training generally will stay the same. I'll always incorporate some cardio for my guys because I don't want them to not be fit because they are dads. And remember, our goal in life is to dominate our children as long as we can as dads, just so they know that they haven't got one over on us.
That's the new ethos for the Fit Dads Club, is that to dominate our kids as long as possible.
The Fit Dads Club, where we dominate our kids. Your goal is to maintain your cardiovascular fitness because that's important. Like it is. So we have a bit of cardio and we're just focusing on getting progressively stronger. Now, when we're looking at this, doesn't mean like your total volume's always going to go up, but we're always going to push it like an extra rep or a little bit of weight. If you can't put a little bit more weight, do an extra rep, do an extra set. So that's what we're going to be focusing on with our training either way. Now, your strength will go up when you're in a lean mass gain phase, purely because you're eating more calories. Your body has more fuel in its system. You have more carbohydrates. You have more glycogen. You're probably going to be taking some creatine either way, but you're going to get more strength gains there, which is awesome. And you start to feel better in the gym. You probably get less injuries because you are eating more calories as well, because your body's not cannibalizing itself on a daily basis, right? Like if you're in a cut, you remember you're cannibalizing your body. You're breaking down tissue. You're not going to feel as strong, and that's okay. In a lean mass gain phase, you're going to be like, oh, I feel juicy. I feel swole because I've got glycogen in my muscle mass and inside my muscles, and you feel pumped from your workout. So I think that's a good thing to understand as well.
100%. There's the idea, I think it's probably worth touching on as well, as the idea of the recomp, especially just touching on the skinny fat guys. A lot of them will think of the idea of a recomp as sexy, right? Now, recompositioning, as we talked about, is dropping body fat and gaining muscle at the same time. And it is only really viable for a couple of people. Number one, complete brand new trainees where the stimulus of lifting weights and the novel stimulus of lifting weights is enough for their body to signal to grow muscle without an abundance of extra calories. Basically, and for most people, they'll still pull the calories from your diet and also from your body fat, which is why novice trainees who are extremely overweight tend to be the people who are the ones that will recomposition the best. They'll be the people that can actually do both because their body has extra calories to kind of pull from for the day-to-day functioning, and then it can take the extra calories from the diet and use that. And it's like the novel stimulus and their excess body fat is enough for them to lose weight and gain some muscle mass, lose body fat and gain muscle mass at the same time. It is a temporary and slow process, and it shouldn't be necessarily the goal, but it is a thing that I have seen happen with a bunch of our guys that's come to us and have never trained before. They start on a pretty decent program, right? If I do say so myself, and they'll get results that way, and that is a good thing. This is why you have more than just the weight measurement. You start to look at measurements around the belly button. You start to look at measurements. Like I've got a guy, I guess a real example of this. I've got a client who has lost one of his legs, right, from just above the knee, and for years he was not walking around. He was in a wheelchair until he got a proper prosthetic fitted, and then now he's like, I've walked more in the last 6 weeks than I have in the last 6 years, but his weight hasn't changed all that much. And it's like, well, you are regaining a hell of a lot of lost muscle mass in your leg, in your like glute and in your other leg that's been not being used, and he's seeing the physio and he's doing exercises with them and all the other things, the photos, the measurements. He's lost 2 centimeters over his abdomen in the last week and a half. It's like, this is an indicator that we are in that place. So there are plenty of circumstances where people will recomposition. If you've lost a hell of a lot of muscle mass after being, relatively muscular when you were younger and then not training for a number of years, you can kind of get that effect back. But it is a very minor thing that shouldn't be something that most people should aim for unless you are like a brand new trainee and you've got plenty of fat to lose. Yeah, it'll kind of happen naturally. But if you are someone who is skinny fat and you've got this idea in your head of I'm going to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, you might by like a tiny bit, but the focus should be on being in a deficit. And if you happen to gain, you happen to gain. That's at least my mentality around the idea of a recomposition.
Yeah, mate, I completely agree with you. And generally, some of my clients that come in, sometimes they don't carry too much fat. I'll ask them, do you want to, like a body recomp is more of an unsexy, slow approach. It's like, are you happy to be kind of unmotivated by the visual changes, but you will change over 16 weeks, but you'll be unmotivated on the weekly basis? Or would you rather be like super motivated, just drop some fat and over the next 6 weeks get shredded, or essentially drop like 4 or 5 kilos of body fat? We'll go into a deficit and then we go into a lean mass gain phase. Like, which one's better for you? What would you like to do as far as your motivation levels? And I think when people then can own that decision themselves. It's like, dude, you've chose, like, and one of my boys did chose a recomp, and like, you know, over 16 weeks, dude, massive difference in muscle gain, massive difference in fat gain. But like, you know, if you look at his photos like fortnightly, it's like not much changes at all. And he was just happy to go, no, well, I don't want to diet too hard, but I'm happy to lift like an animal. And you know, eat a little bit more calories. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So I think if you understand that, like, that's crucial as well. You have to zoom out on visual representation of changes in a body recomp phase also. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think for most people, I remember it was a quote I actually first heard from you, which was, "The man who chases two rabbits catches neither." And that's the approach that most people tend to take in health and fitness, right? And it's
Yeah.
when it comes to gaining the muscle and losing the fat, it's like if someone tries to really hard to do both at the same time without accepting the sort of the slower progress, then you're going to crash and burn, and you're going to burn out, and you're not going to feel motivated. It's the same thing with your style of training as well. When you are training to gain lean muscle mass, you're not going to be training for a marathon at the same time, or at least you shouldn't be, to maximize your results, right? The phases of your training need to be specific to what your goals are. And for gaining muscle mass, that might mean you don't get to do as many sexy things. That is going to be, you know, what is the best response I get from my chest on which machine, right? You're not going to be doing sprints and sled pushes and that kind of stuff. You're going to be probably more so doing, you know, your incline chest presses and then your flies to isolate your chest to get, you know, a real good stimulus in there, and your bicep curls and your overhead tricep extensions and stuff. You're going to be doing a little bit more machine work because, as I found out, doing a hell of a lot of compound work fucking beats you up over time. And doing a hell of a lot of compound work, like I was doing I would go a heavy set to failure, then I'd do a light set to failure, like within 1 to 2 reps of failure, depending on how I was feeling on the day, but most of the time to failure. And then I would be doing like bent over rows, and then a bench press, and then an incline barbell press. And it's like all of that requires a hell of a lot of stabilizing muscles. It requires a lot of work from the joints. And it's like, by the end of this, I was sent my central nervous system. This is the other factor when it comes to training for a bulk. Your central nervous system takes a hell of a lot more of a hit because you are progressively overloaded and you're pushing your limits. And that fatigue builds up over time to the point where eventually every, you know, between sort of 4 and 8 weeks, depends on how hard you're pushing it, you'll need a deload. You'll need to take a week where you drop down your volume and the amount of intensity you're putting into your sessions by like, you know, 50, 60% to really let your body recover. So you really got to be in tune with your body and notice, well, if I'm not able to push any further on, you know, from week to week, maybe I need to take a deload before I can get back into it because my body's kind of at its capacity. So you've got to remember that your goal is your goal. So if your goal is to gain lean muscle mass, then as Trav said, there's fucking so many factors around it we could go into, around sleep and hydration and carb and protein timing and all that kind of stuff. Like the big one is sleep and stress, right? Try not to stress too much as best you can, involve some meditation, get good night's sleep as best you can. Those are the main things. And then as long as you're eating and your hydration is on point, the timing of meals isn't going to be huge. As long as you're not doing fucking 1 meal a day style thing where you try to eat 2,500 calories in 1 meal at the end of the day, that's probably not optimal. But your goal is your goal. Don't try and do, like, I'm going to still on this bulk, I'm going to incorporate on this lean mass phase, pardon my English, I'm going to definitely focus in on improving my running a little bit, not necessarily trying to, you know, with the goal of running, you know, 4-minute kilometers, but with the goal of extra cardio health. Like the heart is a muscle too. You know, I want to bulk that up too and get that nice and strong. But it's been shown to help recovery capacity when it comes to your training. It's been shown to, you know, obviously improve your health. Like I'm not trying to improve that area in some crazy amount of way. I'm just trying to get that up to baseline and up to the point where I'm not puffed after running for, you know, a kilometer or two. So I want to be able to get that up. So that's not necessarily trying to crazily grow that area, but yeah, there are a couple of other areas that you can have kind of on maintenance as you grow your muscle mass, but that's got to be your main focus.
100%, mate. And I think the last thing before we sort of switch off today, guys, is, you know, the maintenance periods, right? So if you got like 30 kilos to lose, just so we understand, you're probably not going to diet for, you know, 40 weeks straight. Okay, that's when we look at, you know, you just be eating too few calories and too psychologically burnt out and probably injured. So when we're looking at this, we'll probably diet for like 16 to 18 weeks and then go into a maintenance phase just to give you psychologically a bit of a break and physiologically a bit of a break from that stress of dieting on you. And then you can eat a little bit more, you're still training, you're still feeling good, and then we go back into a dieting phase. So I think maintenance phases aren't just for the end of everything, just so we all understand this. It's like we diet, we've got more, we lose 14 kilos, 15 kilos. We go into maintenance for a couple of weeks. Psychologically, we're getting better. Physiologically, we're training harder because we're eating more calories. Then we diet again for the next sort of 12 weeks. Okay, cool. We lost our 30 kilos now, and we go back into maintenance. And maybe you might even diet again for another 4 weeks. I don't know. Everyone is individual. I think that's the biggest thing. And this is the last thing for fucking Terry Troll out there on the internet. Okay, we have to understand if someone's eating 2,400 calories, that could be a bulk for them because you don't know the circumstance. If someone's eating 1,600 calories, that also could be a cut for them for a fully grown male, not just your fucking grandma. So when we have to understand this, guys, everyone has a different circumstance, and I hate it when we start to give people advice when we don't understand their context. You don't know their life. You don't know their background. You don't know how much lean muscle mass. You don't know how many steps they're having. You don't know how many times they shit in a day. But you're out there saying you are eating too less or you eating too much just because you're a fucking tradie who walks 25,000 steps a day and hasn't got any constraints in your life. You don't have kids. You train for 3 hours in the gym and you love your fucking bicep curls. So you want to tell someone else advice because you think you're a fucking hero. So guys, if anyone is out there trolling anyone, like pull your fucking head in and do something else other than just annoying people on the internet. There's a thing what you can do is just scroll past it. No one asked for your advice. We're trying to educate other people out here and trying to do a service for the community. So your cut calories, your bulk calories are your calories, no one else's. That's why I hate the day on a plate because people think they should follow. I like context. This is my day on a plate, relevant to me, relevant to my circumstance, relevant to my activity levels. You don't know if they're doing 3,000 steps a day. They might be on a cut and that's what their steps are doing because that's their constraints because they're a fucking dad, right? And they've got a job and they're trying to look after kids, maybe like whatever they're doing. You don't know what they are doing, guys. You don't know their tracking history. So stop giving unsolicited advice. If I want your advice, I'll probably have your phone number your number in my phone. If I don't fucking want it. Okay, guys? So I know that was a bit of a rant, but it's something I needed to say because it shits me to tears. Terry Troll out there just going off his head. And people will be, oh, but, you know, you're putting stuff on the internet, so you should get trolled. It's like, dude, I don't get trolled. I actually don't care. But for everyone else out there gets trolled, people tell me I'm fucking bald. I don't care. People tell me I'm fat. People tell me my calves are too big. It's like, dude, like I've got my calves are too big. That's not a problem.
That's not a problem. that's the dream.
Yeah, but it'd be like on the ads, like, that guy has abnormally large calves. What's wrong with him? It's like, dude, I don't know. But I think that's a first world problem. First
Going to treat these calves like my kids and raise them.
Yeah, exactly. So, I like that. It's a good dad joke. But it's like, guys, it's like, you know, just, you know, yes, we're putting things out there for the internet. Yes, that might have seemed a bit fiery, but I like to get fired up on a podcast now and then. I don't think I did on this podcast yet. So everyone out there, that was your tune.
Yeah, well, it's passion, right? It's the same thing. It's like when you get really stuck into it, it's passion for the subject, but it's also passion for dads out there who might see some guys being like just some fucking meathead out there, like, oh, bro, that's fucking way too few calories. You're eating like a little girl or whatever. And then it's like, then there will be dads out there that will see that and then go, oh, fuck, am I eating too little? Is this not enough? Should I be eating fucking 4,000 calories on a bulk? Like, you know, this guy who fucking hikes every day and then goes and spends 2.5 hours in the gym and you know, has been doing this for the last fucking 10 years. No, find yours. And I did a post on this not that long ago where it was like, if you want to find your maintenance calories or your cut calories, your bulk calories, track your weight, track your food. If you're losing weight, you're in a fucking deficit. Doesn't matter what anyone says. If you have not lost weight, and this is the thing, people, oh, I'm eating, this guy said I should eat 220, I'm eating in a deficit. I even had a client the other day who was like, I was eating this much, but I wasn't losing weight. I'm like, cool. So you went in a deficit. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's it. You were just not in a fucking deficit. If you are not losing weight, you are not in a calorie deficit. That is as far as it needs to go. And if you are losing weight, you're in a deficit. Congratulations, right? The magnitude of that deficit is the issue that most people have, right? Like, don't diet down on 800 calories. We can pretty safely say that that's probably too little for most people. Again, unless you're in a coma and you have, you know, lost both your legs and both your arms, you've got a smaller body. Okay, cool. In that case, forgiveness. You probably only need 800 calories a day. But for everyone else out there, don't listen to people on the internet who give you definitive numbers. Find the number that works for you. And if you're struggling to find that number and stay accountable to that number, get a coach. Speaking of coaching, head to fit-dad.club.
Exactly, guys. So it's like you have so many things that impact deficit, lean mass, you're carrying medications you're taking, like they impact your metabolic rate, unknown thyroid issues because you don't get your bloods
Undiagnosed
done.
shit.
Yeah, exactly. So like you don't understand this stuff, guys. So, and also overall activity levels. So please, again, it's very simple. Are you losing weight? You're in a deficit. If you're not in a deficit. Okay, cool. Fine. Track your calories. Now go to fit-dad.club for us to help you close the gap between where you are and where you want to be, because that's what we do on a daily basis. We help real dads get real results with real fucking programs and great conversations on the weekly basis on our coaching calls. So, if you want to close the gap and you want some results and you want them guaranteed, we'll help you lose 10 kilos of fat in 20 weeks. That's guaranteed, guys. It is what it is. If you haven't got guaranteed results in the past, that's what we do. Now, go there, sign up, leave us a comment on the podcast, wherever you are. Comment, rate, review, share it with a friend. If you want to hear my weekly rants on these podcasts, tune in. You can go, when's Travis going to blow his mind? Well, it was just before. But
that means this week's real talk is probably going to be a bit more subdued. He let the pressure cooker steam vent.
Exactly. It's gone. It's out.
Yeah.
But other than that, guys, that is it for today. You guys have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. And that is the Fit Dad podcast. Cheers for that, Jace. And cheers for everyone listening. See you guys.